Well, today we'll hear from people who are made of sterner stuff. And first of all, I want to introduce to you John Bryan from the Tasmanian Conservation Trust, who's been campaigning on marine issues for a long time. He's a great photographer of underwater sea life. He knows the area out here intimately. And so I'd like to introduce to you John Bryan to talk about Tasmania's unique marine heritage and what this pulp mill will do to it.
If you listened to Malcolm Turnbull last week and his spin on the Chief Scientist's report, you could be forgiven for thinking that we don't have to worry about the mill impacts on the marine environment. Just don't believe it. What the report actually does is reinforce the concerns that have been raised about the lack of hydrodynamic modelling and inadequate toxicity testing and a whole range of other problems for really since the whole project came to light. The conditions provided by this report are really what we've been asking for all along, but they just don't go far enough. Minister Turnbull keeps saying that the mill will be world's best practice. Well, maybe if we're living in the third world that could be true, but we don't and it isn't. In fact, the amount of dioxins permitted to be released under Turnbull's plan are only 20% greater than for all 47 pulp mills in Scandinavia. Claims this mill is going to be world's best practice, clearly an exaggeration. To even be in the running for this status, the mill has to be something like closed loop, it has to have a chlorine-free process, or it has to have tertiary treatment at the very least. The mill doesn't have any of these processes in place. While the Chief Scientist's report has certainly introduced a higher standard of science, there are still gaping holes in this report. For example, bottlenose dolphins swim up and down this coast all the time. That species hasn't been assessed at all by the process. There's no consideration of damage to the commercial scallop beds in the area that are likely to come online in the near future. As Jeff said, the Minister has gone ahead and approved the mill without fundamental data being available. Hydrodynamic modelling is missing. Toxicity testing is missing. The science is based on incomplete data and has to be taken with that thought in mind. If Malcolm Turnbull has his way, it looks like we're not going to get the data until the mill construction begins. And if a problem is identified by the data when it finally does arrive, there's simply no process which insists that the mill will be stopped at that point. It is important to remember that the Chief Scientist's report was limited to Commonwealth issues. Impacts on state waters were not within its scope. According to the report, the Environment Department sought advice on moving the outfall further offshore to increase diffusion and dispersal of pollutants and reduce the chance of them being driven ashore. I'll quote directly from the report. The Department is of the view that moving the outfall further offshore would proportionally increase the likelihood of effects in the Commonwealth marine waters. The report also states that there are indications that levels of pollutants that may accumulate in Tasmanian waters may be of concern and that therefore there may be indirect impacts on Commonwealth waters. In other words, what the report says is that as long as they keep the crap out of Commonwealth waters, they don't have to care or worry about what happens in Tasmania's waters. Despite the impression created by Malcolm Turnbull, the Chief Scientist's report clearly acknowledges a real risk to the marine environment. Again, according to the report, this risk is supposed to be controlled by a comprehensive monitoring program. Unfortunately, the limits placed on things like dioxins are really quite high. For example, sediment levels that are permitted under the process that's approved by Turnbull are an order of magnitude higher than what is acceptable in European industrial sites. Unbelievably, after all the distrust and lack of process that we've seen during the development of this application to build a pulp mill here, Turnbull directs that effluent samples for the monitoring program will be collected by the mill operator rather than an independent body. Well, should we care about what happens in the marine environment here? I think it's pretty obvious. If you just have a look over the dunes behind us, you'll see there's a beautiful beach, a wonderful heritage lighthouse, and a fantastic part of the coastline that is so important to Tasmanians. I guess I'm lucky enough through my work to have dived all along the Great Barrier Reef, an iconic part of Australia's marine environment. And I have to say that as someone who's dived in this area extensively, there is nothing on the Great Barrier Reef that I have seen that is significantly better than anything I've seen here. In fact, the deep-water sponge gardens in the Tamar River, the seal colony at 10th Island are amazing marine environments, absolutely world-class and really deserving of protection. Sadly, as they're all in state waters, they don't even get a look into the process. I guess there are some other good things that have come out of the Chief Scientist's report. A really obvious suggestion that people have made with regard to monitoring dioxins and other persistent organic pollutants is to look at sentinel species such as the Australian fur seal, the little penguin. And this is part of the process, although the monitoring program is a bit thin on details. But what really worries me is that if problems are detected in marine mammals, such as the Australian fur seal, there is no requirement for the mill to be closed down. There's no protection given. There's no meaning for that sort of monitoring program in the Turnbull approach to controlling this mill's impacts on the marine environment. What I would like to know is how any Australian Environment Minister, whether it's Peter Garrett or Malcolm Turnbull, can stand up with a straight face and complain about the Japanese killing whales if he doesn't stand up and protect our own marine mammals from death by pollution from this pulp mill. It's sad to say, but it looks like the Commonwealth Marine Environment is actually getting the best of all assessments so far with regard to this mill. But I hope I've enlightened you a little bit today and pointed out that if you are feeling secure about at least that part of the assessment, unfortunately we have a long way to go before it's actually done properly. Thanks very much.